One time, a client who I had been seeing for a few months came into my office for her scheduled appointment, and after some brief preliminaries, she announced, "I think I was raped." It is not easy to know how to respond to a statement like that, although there is frequently some mystery around such events. Often alcohol is involved, as it is in most sexual assault cases. Alcohol can cause ambiguity. That's partly why people drink. Alcohol temporarily lifts the terrible burden of self-consciousness from people. Drunk people know about the future, but they don't care about it. That's exciting. That's exhilarating. Drunk people can party like there's no tomorrow. But because there is a tomorrow, most of the time, drunk people also get in trouble. They black out. They go to dangerous places with careless people. They have fun, but they also get raped. So I immediately thought something like that might be involved. How else to understand, "I think"? But that wasn't the end of the story. She added an extra detail. 5 times. The first sentence was awful enough, but the second produced something unfathomable. 5 times? What could that possibly mean? My client told me that she would go to a bar and have a few drinks. Someone would start to talk with her. She would end up at his place or her place with him. The evening would proceed inevitably to its sexual climax. The next day she would wake up uncertain about what happened, uncertain about her motives, uncertain about his motives, and uncertain about the world. Miss S, we'll call her, was vague to the point of non-existence. She was a ghost of a person. She dressed, however, like a professional. She knew how to present herself for first appearances. In consequence, she had finagled her way onto a government advisory board considering the construction of a major piece of transportation infrastructure, even though she knew nothing about government advising or construction. She also hosted a local public access radio show dedicated to small business, even though she had never held a real job and knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. She had been receiving welfare payments for the entirety of her adulthood. Her parents had never provided her with a minute of attention. She had 4 brothers, and they were not all good to her. She had no friends now, and none in the past. She had no partner. She had no one to talk to, and she didn't know how to think on her own. And that's not rare. She had no self. She was, instead, a walking cacophony of unintegrated experiences. I had tried previously to help her find a job. I asked her if she had a CV. She said yes. I asked her to bring it to me. She brought it to our next session. It was 50 pages long. It was in a file folder box, divided into sections with manila tag separators, the ones with the little colorful index markers on the sides. The sections included such topics as My Dreams and Books I Have Read. She had written down dozens of her nighttime dreams in the My Dreams section and provided brief summaries and reviews of her reading material. This is what she proposed to send to prospective employers, or perhaps already had, who really knew? It is impossible to understand how much someone has to be no one at all to exist in a world where a file folder box containing 50 index pages listing dreams and novels constitutes a CV. Miss S knew nothing about herself. She knew nothing about other individuals. She knew nothing about the world. She was a movie played out of focus, and she was desperately waiting for a story about herself to make it all make sense. If you add some sugar to cold water and stir it, the sugar will dissolve. If you heat up that water, you can dissolve more. If you heat the water to boiling, you can add a lot more sugar and get that to dissolve too. Then if you take that boiling sugar water and slowly cool it, and don't bump or jar it, you can trick it, I don't know how else to phrase this, into holding a lot more dissolved sugar than it would have if it had remained cold all along. That's called a supersaturated solution. If you drop a single crystal of sugar into that supersaturated solution, all the excess sugar will suddenly and dramatically crystallize. It's as if it were crying out for order. That was my client. People like her are the reason that the many forms of psychotherapy currently practiced all work. People can be so confused that their psyches will be ordered and their lives improved by the adoption of any reasonably orderly system of interpretation. This is the bringing together of the disparate elements of their lives in a disciplined manner, any disciplined manner. So if you have come apart at the seams, or if you have never been together at all, you can restructure your life on Freudian, Jungian, Adlerian, Rogerian, or behavioral principles. At least then you make sense. At least then you're coherent. At least then you might be good for something, if not good yet for everything. You can't fix a car with an axe, but you can cut down a tree. That's still something. At about the same time I was seeing this client, the media was all afire with stories of recovered memories, particularly of sexual assault. The dispute raged apace. Were these genuine accounts of past trauma? Or were they post hoc constructs, dreamed up as a consequence of pressure wittingly or unwittingly applied by incautious therapists, grasped onto desperately by clinical clients all too eager to find a simple cause for all their trouble? Sometimes it was the former, perhaps, and sometimes the latter. I understood much more clearly and precisely, however, how easy it might be to instill a false memory into the mental landscape as soon as my client revealed her uncertainty about her sexual experiences. The past appears fixed, but it's not in an important psychological sense. There's an awful lot to the past, after all, and the way we organize it can be subject to drastic revision. Imagine, for example, a movie where nothing but terrible things happen. But in the end, everything works out. Everything is resolved. A sufficiently happy ending can change the meaning of all the previous events. They can all be viewed as worthwhile given that ending. Now imagine another movie. A lot of things are happening. They're all exciting and interesting, but there are a lot of them. 90 minutes in, you start to worry, this is a great movie, you think. But there are a lot of things going on. I sure hope the filmmaker can pull it all together. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the story ends abruptly, unresolved, or something facile and cliched occurs. You leave deeply annoyed and unsatisfied, failing to notice that you were fully engaged and enjoying the movie almost the whole time while you were in the theater. The present can change the past, and the future can change the present. When you are remembering the past as well, you remember some parts of it and forget others. You have clear memories of some things that happened, but not others, of potentially equal import. Just as in the present, you are aware of some aspects of your surroundings and unconscious of others. You categorize your experience, grouping some elements together and separating them from the rest. There's a mysterious arbitrariness about all of this. You don't form a comprehensive, objective record. You can't. You just don't know enough. You just can't perceive enough. You're not objective either. You're alive. You're subjective. You have vested interests, at least in yourself, at least usually. What exactly should be included in the story? Where exactly is the border between events? The sexual abuse of children is distressingly common. However, it's not as common as poorly trained psychotherapists think, and it also does not always produce terribly damaged adults. People vary in their resilience. An event that will wipe one person out can be shrugged off by another. But therapists with a little second-hand knowledge of Freud often axiomatically assume that a distressed adult in their practice must have been subject to childhood sexual abuse. Why else would they be distressed? So they dig and infer and intimate and suggest and overreact and bias and tilt. They exaggerate the importance of some events and downplay the importance of others. They trim the facts to fit their theory. And they convince their clients that they were sexually abused. If they could only remember. And then the clients start to remember. And then they start to accuse. And sometimes what they remember never happened and the people accused are innocent. The good news? At least the therapist's theory remains intact. That's good, for the therapist. But there's no shortage of collateral damage. However, people are often willing to produce a lot of collateral damage if they can retain their theory. I knew about all this when Miss S came to talk to me about her sexual experiences. When she recounted her trips to the singles bars and their recurring aftermath, I thought of a bunch of things at once. I thought, you're so vague and so non-existent. You're a denizen of chaos in the underworld. You are going 10 different places at the same time. Anyone can take you by the hand and guide you down the road of their choosing. After all, if you're not the leading man in your own drama, you're a bit player in someone else's. And you might well be assigned to play a dismal, lonely, and tragic part. After Miss S recounted her story, we sat there. I thought, you have normal sexual desires. You're extremely lonely. You're unfulfilled sexually. You're afraid of men and ignorant of the world and know nothing of yourself. You wander around like an accident waiting to happen, and the accident happens, and that's your life. I thought, part of you wants to be taken. Part of you wants to be a child. You were abused by your brothers and ignored by your father, and so part of you wants revenge upon men. Part of you is guilty. Another part is ashamed. Another part is thrilled and excited. Who are you? What did you do? What happened? What was the objective truth? There was no way of knowing the objective truth, and there never would be. There was no objective observer, and there never would be. There was no complete and accurate story. Such a thing did not and could not exist. There were and are only partial accounts of fragmentary viewpoints, but some are still better than others. Memory is not a description of the objective past. Memory is a tool. Memory is the past guides to the future. If you remember that something bad happened and you can figure out why, then you can try to avoid that bad thing happening again. That's the purpose of memory. It's not to remember the past. It's to stop the same damn thing from happening over and over. I thought, I could simplify Miss S's life. I could say that her suspicions of rape were fully justified and that her doubt about the events was nothing but additional evidence of her thorough and long-term victimization. I could insist that her sexual partners had a legal obligation to ensure that she was not too impaired by alcohol to give consent. I could tell her that she had indisputably been subject to violent and illicit acts unless she had consented to each sexual move explicitly and verbally. I could tell her that she was an innocent victim. I could have told her all of that. And it would have been true. And she would have accepted it as true and remembered it for the rest of her life. She would have been a new person with a new history and a new destiny. But I also thought, I could tell Miss S that she is a walking disaster. I could tell her that she wanders into a bar like a Peterson in a coma, that she is a danger to herself and others, that she needs to wake up, and that if she goes to singles bars and drinks too much and is taken home and has rough, violent sex, or even tender, caring sex, then what the hell does she expect? In other words, I could have told her, in more philosophical terms, that she was Nietzsche's pale criminal, the person who at one moment dares to break the sacred law and at the next shrinks from paying the price. And that would have been true too, and she would have accepted it as such and remembered it. If I had been the adherent of a left-wing social justice ideology, I would have told her the first story. If I had been the adherent of a conservative ideology, I would have told her the second. And her responses after having been told either the first or the second story would have proved to my satisfaction and hers that the story I had told her was true, completely, irrefutably true. And that would have been advice.